Hello. Today I'm going to tie for you what I'm calling a froglet. It's summertime in western Pennsylvania and we need to chase warm water species, and I'll talk more about this as we get into tying. But we're going to do this fly on a size 8 TMC. It's kind of a stout hook. I'm going to use some craft foam, a thin strip of yellow, and a little square of green. And we're going to pick a few feathers from my Chickabou pelt, and we use them based on their properties, couple for legs and some filler. Going to use a rubber strand for the legs on this little froglet and a couple different threads to hold it together. Originally I was going to use that Danville, but it wasn't quite strong enough to pull the phone tight. So I think what happened there is that stuff's been around a long time. I tied the back half of the fly with the Danville and then switched to the GSP. And then also the GSP is a lot more durable when it comes to, there's a few strands of it exposed over the front of this fly. You'll see at the end. So that GSP is almost impervious to fish's teeth. So here we have the thread started about halfway back. I'm going to wrap back to the barb, and I'm going to use a little super glue. And it's mostly, even the Danville is a little slippery and wants to spin on the hook. I didn't wax it, so I threw a little glue on it. I'm going to use super glue a couple of times throughout this fly, so it didn't seem like a bad idea to put a drop here. So what we have here are a couple of the fluffy feathers from that Chickabou pelt. They're kind of, I'm just putting them in between to hold what I'm going to call the legs apart. So I tied two of those in and snipped off the butts. I did snip out the centers. I don't like those wispy centers on these feathers, so. And now we're going to get a couple more of those feathers from the Chickabou pelt. What you might use as saddle hackles, but in this case we're going to use them as legs. So I grabbed two of those and I'll put them back to back. On a large fly I may do two on each side. But what we're after is something to imitate, maybe a small popper, but something with common materials that I have on my bench without woodworking and whatever else it takes to build a good popper. So here I held one on each side. I didn't trim out or strip these at all. This is something I saw the late Dave Whitlock do, and the extra barbules sticking out the back won't hurt. And he claimed that it helped him place those feathers. They didn't want to spin on the hook, but I can't argue. It kind of works. So here we have the legs. They're in. They're about a hook length behind the bend of the hook. Again, we're going to snip off the excess and wrap down the butts. And there's one more feather from the pelt we're going to put in. And I'm going to wrap it on a popper. You might call this what, a skirt. But it's something to add a little bulk and a little body to the back of the fly. Now I'm going to take my thread behind the feather and park it just in front of the tail. And then I'm going to do that. And you'll see I stripped out a little more of the barbules on the one side because I want the feather to wrap with the barbules kind of facing back. So that helps keep it turned the right way. And we'll put a few wraps here. And the idea is I'm going to bring that thread through there, and it'll kind of strengthen that hackle I'm using for the skirt, but it'll also help me fold it down a little bit. So I'll get a couple of wraps, come up through. Hackle pliers aren't exactly one-handed sometimes. Just spiral up through. And when I get far enough, I'll push everything back and wrap them down. So I mentioned a popper here. This time of year and with the farm ponds and the little lakes in the area, if you can get out there, maybe wet wade, watch it get dark and drop some of these kind of bugs in the shallows. The larger panfish, the smaller bass. It'd be fun to catch the larger ones, but I'll be honest with you that they're fewer and far between some days. So I downsize and do this, and maybe on a 6 weight rod, um, a dozen or so of those smaller fish make for a good evening. So here we have the skirt pushed back, brought the thread back forward, did a whip finish. I'll add a little more of that super glue. Now here this serves two purposes. It may lock that knot in a little bit, but more importantly, when you start your GSP on the hook, it's another one that wants to slide. So um, you can use wax if you want, but again, because I'm going to add some foam and I have the glue out, this is the way we went. So if you notice, I didn't really snip that thread off. I just kind of pushed it across the GSP, and it kind of slices out. So this is about a 2 millimeter by 3 millimeter maybe. Probably was going to be 2 by 2, but this is how it came out. Um, a strip of yellow craft foam. Again, a common material. And we'll put in a half hitch just to kind of keep things in place. And I am going to use the rotary feature. I look back and I watch guys do that, but I don't know how anybody lives without the rotary feature these days. So a little drop of super glue on top. Now, you notice I wrap that foam from the front back. That's to just kind of level things out. It's still not perfectly level, but bass won't care. So this is, you get a feel for this. You don't want to pull this too tight. You want to leave some of those air pockets or cells in this foam, so it does have some, um, what's the word, floatability. So come forward, get things out of the way, and reach behind the camera and get a wrap or two over this, the end of this foam to hold things in place. And you can do these in different colors. I did green and yellow. They're common colors. I had them here. This is leftover foam from hopper patterns. I did a bunch of hoppers that I took out west with me and fished on the Shoshone River, and we had a good time there. So I'm going to bring the thread back to about the middle and park it. And I'm going to start on the bottom. So there I did a little, that's a 1/2 inch square. Seems to be about right for this size 8 hook. And I used my scissors to poke a hole in the middle. Now don't ask me why I pulled it off the hook or out of there and turned it. I could have just spun it on the hook. I saw one corner was a little longer, and that's the one I wanted to tie in, I think on top. So we'll get a couple of wraps over just the tip, the corner of this thing. And we trapped the fiber. We'll get that out of the way. And we're going to flip it over. And I guess this isn't a lot different than playing with the foam, and we make gurglers and other flies. I did a mice and in I forget what I called it. It was mice and something or other. I used those, I think, dragon tails, and did a couple of videos last summer when we changed gears and went for bass. And I was looking for something smaller. Like I said, the big bass aren't always there. So now here I trapped on a little bit of that tip I wanted to leave on the bottom. It won't hurt, but it bothers me. So we'll get a couple of wraps over the top. I did some super glue, folded that little square in half, and we're going to do some X wraps. And this is where the GSP is kind of exposed. So a fish's tooth, if it were weaker thread or something else, it might chew that apart. Shorten up the thread and tuck that wrap right down in there. Still doing X wraps on the bottom. And we'll lay that one back in there, and we're ready to whip finish. And I know it looks kind of odd at this point, but Oops. So that was unique. The whip finisher tried to split the GSP there, but uh, wasn't a problem. Came back and caught the whole bundle and did about, I don't know what that was, 6 or 8 turn whip finish. And here we do a little snipping and make this look more like bait. So I am angling a little wider in the front, narrower in the back. Okay, so we like the looks of that. We'll come back in. Again, the super glue is out, so I'm just going to, this could be head cement. But I'm just going to come in with the little drop of super glue, hit the head, and the cross wraps, and make sure, and that GSP seems to soak this stuff right up, so I'm pretty sure everything's locked in place by the time I'm done. All right, now you could probably fish this fly just like this, but there's one more little finishing touch I'm going to do. So I slipped a piece of round yellow rubber in a needle, and we're going to push that through. You can see the glue's still a little soggy in there, so if we work fast, we'll get that in there, and the glue will kind of set later and hold things in place. Although it moves rather freely at this point. All right, so a little fiddling around. I was going to just split it, and then I think one was still a little long, so we'll come back in and trim that one, and we'll call it done. So if you drop these on a pond just before dark with a few big panfish or some smaller bass, this could be a good time. If you want to learn more about me, look me up on Amazon. And until next time, be safe.